Again, thanks so much for joining. So you're in Maryland, right? I did get that correctly.
Yeah. So our company is based in DC. I live in Maryland. Obviously, with COVID, we're all remote, but that's not really a big deal because we have a couple hundred translators remote all over the world. So really, this is kind of a natural thing for us. It didn't affect us in terms of we're not shutting down our international offices because they didn't exist. It's
Right.
far easier for us to be entirely remote.
Yeah, no, it's great, right? It's interesting because the technology sector, and I think the immigration sector is also starting to feel this now. By digitizing, you can be ready for something like this, but then in general, you could just be remote. You can be more of a remote first company, and we'll get to that because I'm really interested to hear about sort of how your business has transformed, how it's changed, how it's been impacted either positively or negatively during these times. I want to start out though just learning about you, right? I kind of wrote about this a little bit, but you and I have known each other for a bit now. We've talked a lot about immigration tech. We've talked a lot about just kind of the changes that are happening in our industry. And I know what you do, but I don't know how you got to where you are. So, can you share a little bit about sort of what was your journey? Did you always know that you wanted to start a company? I know you studied computer science and you are an engineer. You're not an immigration lawyer.
Yeah.
Engineer.
Yeah. So for me, my journey to entrepreneurship, it's definitely a journey. I started at a company more or less kind of right out of high school, maybe like 6 months after. Just doing a variety of tech things. I was recruited and sort of used that as an opportunity to get my parents to agree that, hey, it's a great idea to drop out of college. And so, so my traditional schooling is a little short, but I have self-taught myself how to create software, web development, and I've been doing it since I was like 11. So wow. For me, it's been quite the journey. As far as like entrepreneurship, like my dad, he owns his own business. So like in my parents' eyes and really to me, entrepreneurship was never like a crazy choice, and you kind of, and Jeremy had touched on this on the last episode that joining a startup is more or less seen as a safe option now, whereas maybe 5-10 years ago it wasn't. But for me, there was no other choice. It was a calling in the same way that like a teacher would say, being a teacher is a calling. Being an entrepreneur for me is a calling. And it's a natural evolution as a software engineer because you're constantly building things and you're constantly coming up with, hey, this thing that I built, this could be a business, right? So for me, it's just a natural kind of thing. But yeah, so I started out of high school at like a medium-sized tech company here in Maryland. It was very corporate. It was a nice introduction to, me, like a young 20-year-old, like the idea of reporting to a job and this corporate responsibility, that sort of thing. But it taught me some things that are helpful.
So you started coding when you were 11.
Yeah. So
how did that happen? Were you like you had the computer in the house and you were starting to tinker, or kind of how did that?
I was very much the kid that your parents like are like, you need to go outside. Please go outside. Like for me, you talk about in order to master something, you need to have 10,000 hours doing something. For me, that's where I got those hours. It was not, other people learn things in school. For me, it was after school, teaching myself different programming languages, building stuff, kind of tinkering in the sense, and just spending a lot of time on computers. I was always fascinated with them, and it was something that was accessible to me. I was fortunate enough that my parents were willing to shell out for a computer, and you see now like families that just don't even have a computer, they just have a tablet. It's a little limiting to be able to sort of explore software development with a tablet. So I was very fortunate enough that my parents had a big bulky desktop I could use. So I started I started with web development and then got into like lower level programming languages. And then now I sort of do a mix of that and graphic design and software development really.
So you started. I mean, that's amazing. And actually, I had the computer in the house when I was growing up was in my room, and I, similar to you, was building websites and kind of using learning HTML and things like that. And I think at some point I started skateboarding and just gave it all up. And I remember after law school, I was thinking like, damn, I probably should have been a software engineer rather than a lawyer. But I guess here I am, came back full circle. But it's awesome because, right, a lot of folks who start off doing something when they're young, they might be exploring it because it's interesting, but then they drop it or it kind of falls by the wayside. This was a passion for you from day one, and like you were, like you said, you put in those hours early on. Okay, so you said that you had built some stuff when you were in high school. So you said you were recruited while you were in college, or you were recruited by this company out of high school?
Yeah, no. So it was like the end of the first semester of my first year of college, and they were. I sort of was like, college isn't really for me, and reached out and didn't really expect any sort of. I mean, I didn't have a college degree. I had, a high school diploma, and this company sort of found me and were like, we did an interview and they're like, look, this is a great fit. We don't care about college experience. We just, we want people here. So I used that as sort of a way to convince my parents to be okay with me dropping out of college.
Yeah.
And actually, ironically enough, I was debating using it as an excuse to drop out and then just forming my own company as a way to like further just get beyond that. But no, I was there for like 2 or 3 years and rose to be the chief technology officer, which was
That's incredible.
Not typically something you see. And that was a little bit of a difficult thing being like on an executive level at such a young age when you have people reporting to you that are older than you. But yeah, so it was nice. The company was managed private equity, which basically would buy up other similar technology companies and then work towards a way to optimize. We would work towards a way to optimize their various parts of their technology or find ways to license it, that sort of thing. So it was not terribly fun. And it was definitely not a startup in the traditional sense. There was no ping pong table. There was no keg in the refrigerator. So that was the unfortunate part.
Well, let me ask you this: were you old enough to be drinking?
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
My 21st birthday was we took a company outing to get margaritas. So yeah.
Oh, nice.
So at the beginning, I would not have been old enough to drink the keg in the
right.
But,
Right.
No, so it was not a traditional startup or really a startup at all. And by then, this was like 2012. So the glamour of startups it definitely emerged a bit and certainly appealed to me, which is why I ended up leaving the company with no real idea of what I wanted to start. I had saved up enough where I could sort of, whatever I wanted to do, I could invest that and sort of bootstrap that myself and then find an idea that I liked. So that's kind of the segue into where we are with ImmiTranslate.
Yeah. And so, that's just so incredible and so inspiring. I think, it's becoming a little bit more popular now, right? To maybe not go to college or to leave college and to have that level of self-awareness, when you're, and on the one hand, pretty young, but on the other hand, it's all relative. And if you're 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, you're good at something, what you want to do. I respect that very much. Somebody who just has the sort of self-awareness to say, look, this isn't for me. And at least say, let me try doing something else. College is the traditional route. Let me try taking on this opportunity. To your point, if you had left and said, I'm going to start my own thing, maybe that sounds a little bit less, it's a little bit more risky. Whereas here, okay, fine. You don't have that. You didn't finish college, but you have this company that is asking you to come on board, that is that kind of, outside legitimacy if a parent, let's say, needs that, right? So really cool that you kind of went on that journey, because you hear more about that today than before. But, to your point, even 8-10 years ago, it just was not as popular. So that's so exciting and so inspiring, as well. I kind of went the opposite route. I was like, let me become a lawyer and practice just in case something doesn't work out.
Right? I recall it was like a Steve Jobs quote, which was like, he never worried about leaving because he always had tech to fall back on. And for me, it was like, all right, well, somebody somewhere needs me to develop something. So if I'm living out of a cardboard box, I can at least do that.
That's right. It's an in-demand skill. So, it was a really, really great segue into you came to this company. You were super young, relatively speaking. You rose to become the CTO, and you had folks reporting to you that were, they're more senior than you, and that must have been a challenge. How did you, before we move on to that, in case there are folks listening who maybe are new to being executives or maybe feel some level of imposter syndrome with whatever they're doing, especially people who are launching immigration tech companies or legal tech companies, how did you kind of deal with that? I mean, having folks report to you who are older, who have more years of experience, et cetera.
It's not easy, and it's incredibly political. I would say the number one thing that you could do is be a good listener. You have to listen, and you have to actually listen, which is very important, especially, so in our case, these were, managers that were basically proposing technical solutions, and some of the proposals were effectively competing with each other, and I'm acting as the arbiter, and I'm acting as the voice that then takes that to the CEO, and says, hey, this is our strategy for this particular deal. So being a listener is incredibly important. You have to weigh everyone's input, and you have to, in a way that's political, but at the same time, you're finding a solution to a problem. So you need to make the right decision. You can't just say, well, somebody wants half of this, half of that, so we'll just divide it and call it a day. No, you have to actually, you have to be a good listener, and in a sense, it helps to be an expert, and it helps to find diplomatic solutions. That was really the hardest part, and the part that I didn't really appreciate the most, because at the end of the day, I still had to reconcile different solutions and then take that upstairs to the CEO and the rest of the management team. And one of the reasons that I was so drawn to entrepreneurship was that I didn't have that secondary level. I could just say, great, this is the decision. This is what we're going to do. This is the solution I like. It's the technical solution that works. I get to decide. Unfortunately, in corporate America, it's not always like that. And so my advice to especially those that are on the younger side is listen. And if you're the boy genius, so to speak, you can flaunt it a little bit. That always helps. There's a reason that people put so much faith in you, and you can sort of express yourself and give your opinion, and it does have some actual clout. Don't forget about that. So, but being a listener is incredibly important in a role like that, especially when you're in your early 20s and everyone's much older.
Yeah. No, that's really great advice. So how did you, so your CTO, obviously it sounds like the itch was always there to kind of start your own thing, whether it's to not have a boss or whether it's just because you wanted to create something, right? You wanted to have your own idea that perhaps folks can work for you, but you wanted the idea to be inherently yours. How did you, well, first of all, let's take a step back. How did you leave that company if you didn't already have, or did you already have the idea for ImmiTranslate?
No, so at the time I had no other job offer, a loose idea of what I wanted to do, and an LLC that had a generic name. I had no clue what I wanted to do. And actually, in fairness to sort of my story, I had several failures after, sort of before starting ImmiTranslate, but after leaving AGX, where I didn't the product that I developed didn't work. There was no viable product, or it certainly wasn't viable within the constraints of funding and time. So yeah, I basically handed in my 2 weeks or a month with no nothing to do after that, and nothing but a empty house to go home to. I was nervous, but I had enough savings that I kind of had mapped out what I wanted to do. So I wasn't eating ramen noodles quite yet, but it was a calling. It really was. It was a calling that I knew I would find something, and I just had faith that I'll figure it out. So after I left, I had started a Bitcoin loan service, which was brilliant, but unfortunately did not gain traction. I had worked on a background screening software app that used like social media. Unfortunately, that didn't have much of a viable. It was not a viable business. It was a cool idea, and I collaborated on that with some other people, and so I had sort of a string of failures that I tried to minimize them. There was never like a grand launch, or, we never accepted funding for anything like that. So I had a long string of failures, and then ImmiTranslate kind of popped up just like one afternoon as like sort of an, oh, by the way, from one of my best friends and eventual business partner. He had come to me the prior 2 years he had been in the Air Force, and he had met his a beautiful woman overseas. They clicked. He was deployed in the UK. She was from Mexico studying in the UK. They hit it off right away. And so I think that was 2012 that they went through the K1 fiance visa process, and she came over here to the US. So my Guy Pearson was my best friend. He also had sort of this entrepreneurial desire, but he was in the Air Force, so there's not really much he could do with that. But he had come to me and was like, hey, we went through the K1 visa process as self-filers, and it's not easy, and there's a lot of things that you sort of have to go through. But one of the worst things, this is him telling me, one of the worst things was getting a translation. And I thought it was interesting, but it didn't. Immigration to me at the time was just like, something you hear about as a political issue. It wasn't necessarily something that I had any personal experience with. And so Guy kind of pestered me for like 3 months, turned into 6 months, turned into, a year, about like, hey, we should do this. Like, hey, just help me write this, and, that sort of thing. And we kind of came together at the end of 2013. And I was like, all right, we'll do this. Well, I haven't had much luck with other business ideas. This seems remotely like a good idea. I'm not a linguist. I barely speak English. So for me, the idea of running a translation company was bizarre and very out of my comfort zone. And for Guy, he also only spoke English and didn't have any experience in immigration. The only experience was that he had maybe filed a K1 successfully. It was still not approved yet, so he didn't really know. And then Mitzi, who was his fiance, she was going to be our first Spanish translator. She's a brilliant Spanish translator now, excellent linguist. And so that was kind of what we had is the core beginning of the company. And so for the next like 3 or 4 months, I developed the website, developed the software that allowed clients to upload their documents. We could do it in an efficient, secure manner, and it was very much a minimum viable product. The first iteration of something where so much is just not ready and so much is not polished, but you just desperately want to launch. And I remember it's like the middle of March 2014. We finally get like enough stuff that we can actually launch, and we hit the button. The website's live. And then we're just like, okay, I don't know what to do next. So that kind of brings us to like the marketing angle and how we got started on that, which is a little bit more bizarre. We had, I'm sure a lot of people out there are familiar with Visa Journey. We went out and we're like, hey, what can we do to get like our banner on the page on Visa Journey that talks about translations? And so I think for like $800, we got the banner on the website, and we were like, all right, the sales are going to come rolling in. We're just waiting. I think we waited like a whole week, and then I wake up and I have like 10 text messages from Guy, and then a funny email that was from our credit card processor saying that we had received money. So we were very excited about that. And then we look at the order and we're like, oh crap, this is Thai to English. Like, we don't have a Thai translator. That's how we got started. It was crazy. It was very busy the first couple of weeks as we started to grow the business, and it was very much everyone's hair was on fire. We had to build the landing gear in the air in a sense.
That's crazy. I love the building the plane while you fly, sort of analogy, or I guess in your case, landing gear. Man, that's exciting. And it's really cool how sometimes you just stumble upon ideas in a sense, right? And it sounds like this idea to you didn't initially click as like, this is the thing. I mean, it actually sort of took a little bit of convincing on your end. And I suppose it sounds like you were trying to be a little cautious too, because you had a couple of startups that didn't go exactly how you planned. And I love how, you never know. It's just good to dive in, because clearly this isn't a problem. That clearly there was a need. And clearly you were able to build you and Guy, and you were able to build something really, really cool.
Yeah. For me, it was a couple of factors. The previous failures really didn't weigh on me as much. It was as the idea that somehow I was running a translation business. I remember telling my high school Spanish teacher a couple months ago, like, oh yeah, I own a translation business now, and I can't imagine what she thought. Like, she must have been in horror that this guy that could barely pass Spanish was somehow in charge of translating actual documents. So for me, it was getting over that mental hurdle. And like another thing that I had always been nervous about was going to like in-person conferences, AILA, ERC. I was always nervous about somebody coming up to me and being like, oh, you're ImmiTranslate, and then starting talking to me in a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And that was always like completely unfounded. We've been to a dozen conferences now, and nobody's ever done that. So it was stupid things that you look back and you're like, why didn't you work on that so much more? It would have been so much better. You could have launched sooner. But the reality is that there are weird mental hurdles, for me at least, that cause delays like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably everybody has that. I've definitely had that. A lot of folks I've spoken to, you kind of, we're hard on ourselves, and we come up with sort of these barriers, these artificial barriers, really, whether you're in technology or even if you're an immigration lawyer, for example. I talk to a lot of immigration lawyers that are, nervous to put themselves out there from a marketing standpoint, or they're nervous to, do something different at a conference, or, because you're used to what you're used to. And there's this imposter syndrome that you need a really high level of confidence, right, to kind of break through. But I suppose after a while, once you get through it, you look back and you're like, gosh, why did I ever think that, right? Or how could I ever have been nervous about it? So we have some questions coming in. I want to save them for a couple more minutes, because I'm curious. We started off this conversation talking about sort of where we're at now. You're at home in Maryland. I'm at home in New York. We've met in person, luckily, right, before COVID, before quarantine, but now we can't be doing this in person. But that said, you run a technology company, albeit a global one, but in a sense that you have a global reach, but you don't have necessarily global offices. So how has quarantine, if at all, affected your business, both internally, right? If it has, it could be positive or negative. And also, how has it impacted business at all? Also considering the fact that, because of quarantine, immigration has sort of taken a hit in a way.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, the office thing is a little tough. So we did our fulfillment from a separate office, and so we've had to bring that over here to my basement. So we ship out like signed translations. So that fulfillment has been a little bit different. It's getting used to a process that is operating out of your basement, which is not ideal. That's probably the most noticeable operational aspect of it. Again, all of our translators, we love that they're remote. They're able to work, from all over the globe. So it has not changed much for them. In terms of how the business has changed, probably the biggest thing was when USCIS closed the offices. So we definitely saw a dramatic change in the sort of the type of documents. People were not going to interviews. It's a situation where they're presenting their documents. We saw petitions were sort of dropping off. It's been up and down, the trends that we've seen. And so in terms of other things that have evolved, the biggest thing has been we receive document translation requests for documents that are related to a situation where a client will have to travel overseas. So, for example, medical issues, the death of a family member overseas. In order to acquire a passport, if they don't have one, they have to prove that, okay, this is, my father, he died in Italy. I need to go to Italy. I need a passport. This is his death certificate. I need this translated from Italian to English to give to the State Department. So that's something that we're seeing, and we're trying to adapt to that and help our clients as best we can. So we've anytime there's a situation like that, we automatically upgrade the shipping speed to overnight, so they're able to receive the document the next morning, which is really important for something where you're working against the clock. Obviously, it's a serious situation. This is common with medical and death. So they've got a million things going on. So we're trying to help them get through this situation as efficiently as we can. That's probably the most noticeable. The other thing, which is sort of a macro trend that we've seen since March, has been a dramatic rise in the number of requests for translations for IRCC, the Canadian version of USCIS, effectively. That's been something that has been surprising to us, and we've adjusted our workflow so that we can accommodate translations for IRCC. But yeah, I mean, Canadian immigration, you heard it here first. It's happening. So mobility experts take notice. It's probably the other thing that has come out of COVID that was unexpected.
Yeah, I've been saying that a lot too, talking to folks, a lot of Canadian immigration lawyers and Canadian immigration tech companies. Yeah, there's a huge increase. I mean, part of it has to do with, sort of what's happening with our administration. And so despite the fact that borders are closed, there's still demand rising based on who's going where. That's really fascinating. For folks who are listening, start to put in some comments or ask some questions. What would you like to hear? We're talking about immigration tech. We're talking about translation. We're talking about bigger trends within the immigration space. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments and we'll get to them shortly. I was going to ask you too, in terms of macro trends moving forward, I think in terms of Canada, absolutely, right? The increase is there. And whether or not it drops off after this year's election, we'll see. But I think, there's going to be some momentum that gets built that will probably continue. How do you feel that the immigration industry has changed with respect to technology, right? So whether it's inflation, whether it's something else, right? I've seen an increase, this is something I'm really passionate about. This is how we met, right? Talking through sort of technology in the immigration space. From your vantage point, what have you seen, whether it's with respect to COVID beforehand, and sort of where do you think it's going to go, moving forward?
So that's a great question. So going back to our sort of founding story, people ask me this too. What happened? How did Guy get his documents translated? ImmiTranslate didn't exist, and the reality back then was that the translation companies were very much operating in the past. It was, hey, drop your documents off or fax them over. Like you can't email them. It was very surprising to see that, and that was. There were maybe one or two competitors at the time that were actually taking the time to develop a proper electronic way to do it. And still some of them were, hey, we'll translate it and then we'll mail it to you, and you'll get it a couple weeks later. So for us, I see how we've changed the game in terms of making it all electronic, streamlining it, providing digital copies, providing digitally notarized copies, that sort of thing. I see the bigger trend in immigration. I've seen some. We see Boundless, obviously, Simple Citizen. These are big name companies that have raised a lot of money that want to basically be like a TurboTax model for immigration, and I think that's innovative. I really do. But I also think that they're chasing a decent amount of low-hanging fruit. There have been companies before, Rapid Visa. There are a list of other companies that have operated for years under the sort of fill the forms out on the website and we'll package everything together for you. Excuse me. So for these sort of new startups, shiny new platforms, they're chasing low-hanging fruit that I think is not going to. There's still a lot of expert stuff, excuse me, that will need to be handled by immigration attorneys. So I see shiny new things, to sort of put it mildly. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think the new companies that are launching these platforms, I think that they still have a lot of work to properly replace the existing players, so to speak. But I mean, that's not to say that they're not good companies. I just think that some of the things that they're developing and producing have already existed, and they're finding that it's not a one size fits all for immigration. Something that immigration attorneys could have told you years ago.
Yeah, I went to an Access to Justice convention about a year and a half ago, and one of the stats that really jumped out at me was the fact that 70% of individuals who need immigration support don't get it. Which is, to your point, I think that's probably there's certainly a rise of companies that are really solving the issue of, look, you need immigration services and support. Probably it's straightforward. We're going to charge you less than an attorney. That doesn't mean that there's no work left for the attorney. That means that the attorney can then focus on really the more interesting and complicated tasks and types of cases that are presented to them and that are available and really truly needed in the immigration space. I think there's this, I've talked about this a lot on panels and just talked to other folks. There is a fear in every industry when technology is introduced that it's going to take jobs, it's going to take over the existing sort of infrastructure. But the reality is that we're automating things that we don't want to do, right? I mean, with my startup, we automated something that I did as a lawyer, but that was the least favorite part of my job, which is why I wanted to automate it. Right. The thing that I loved the most when I was practicing was working with clients, understanding their issues, talking through the intricacies of their cases, their unique situation, and having that human connection. And then when there was something administrative, it's always better to have some kind of a technological solution or something automated that sort of handles that. So yeah, like the data input, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of space for multiple players that are doing different variations of, how do you input data best? How do you fill out the forms best? How do you provide the best service? Yeah, it's interesting. It is cool from your perspective too, because you kind of support, like, translations are needed across the board, regardless of whether you're a one in a million case or if you're something that's really kind of run of the mill. I think everyone's going to need translations, which is really kind of cool. The last thing I wanted to ask you, well, actually, let's jump in. We have one comment here. I'll bring it up here from Guy, who does ask, hey Guy, who asks about your integration with, is that Chi or Key?
I think he means ClickFunnels. So actually, that's kind of our goal for 2020 is really to be more of a platform and to increase our integration. So we do have some integrations that are in the pipeline. I know you had Jeremy from DocketWise on last week, and that's certainly one that's high on our list. So we have other integrations with other legal tools that we have in the pipeline. So 2020 is really, before COVID, our goal was let's try and be more of a translation platform, and that's something that we're taking on now. And it's as a bootstrap company, it's always tough for us to sort of engage in these big expenditures and hire additional developers. So that is sort of a con. You talk about being a bootstrap company versus if we had raised $10 million in venture financing, it would have been a lot easier. But that's the nature of a bootstrap business, and it's certainly one of the cons. But yeah, so 2020 for us is all about integrations, which is certainly one that Guy is probably aware of.
Yeah, and I think it's also just something that, to your point, I've spoken to Jeremy, the CEO of DocketWise, and just a lot of other folks in the industry. As more and more immigration tech companies and tech companies that are on the sidelines of immigration, so maybe they're not directly case management, but something else, as more and more of us pop up, it is really beneficial to the industry to not have to sign into 10 different platforms, right? But to have sort of open APIs or other means of integrating. So I think that's really important for our industry. And frankly, I think it's really important for the usability of immigration tech, because immigration lawyers are busy. We're busy.
Yeah. And to that point too, the one thing that I've noticed is as a trend with, we'll call them more proprietary platforms, is that if you're going to be a platform, you should aim to make yourself extensible and open. You should have an API that allows other applications, other companies to provide an integration. The biggest pain point in immigration tech right now is that everyone is siloed, right? So I'm not going to name any names, but there are large companies that have great offerings, but all of it is kept internally, and they don't want anyone else to sort of integrate with it. And at the end of the day, that's always going to be a negative experience for the user. It's always going to be a negative experience for business development, right? You can easily open your platform and be the Twitter and Apple and see what sticks and what you want to build internally versus what you want to just keep as a third-party app. So it's always tough as a sort of a startup trying to rise to the next level, right? You want to add your integration to some existing software or large enterprise tool that's used for hundreds of your potential clients, and when it's sort of locked up and you're prevented from integrating, it's very frustrating. It is very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is why we're doing what we're doing, right? There's changes incremental, I think, and we'll, every little step that we all take and sort of the conversation as it gets broader and broader and includes more people in the immigration space, I hope that it will lead to sort of a wider adoption, more openness, and just more collaboration, I think, between tools. We had, I'm not sure whose comment this was, didn't come up, but we did have someone say, really enjoyed hearing about your journey, inspiring how you molded your career into where you're today, and trailblazing the legal tech industry, which is cool. Like you said earlier, you had a passion, you had the dream of what you wanted to do, and you kind of went for it. And I hope that I hope that folks that take that to heart, right? I get a lot of
I mean, you certainly don't start out building something and think that you're going to be a trailblazer, and I certainly don't think I am, but that's just me being modest. But yeah, it's always good to have something that you want to do and just have a desire to be good at what you do. That's that's what I've set out for ImmiTranslate. You know, maybe translations are, you know, I'm not the best translator. I'm not a translator, but I at least want to provide the best platform and service for our clients. So that's at the end of the day, I can live with that.
Absolutely. So do you have any kind of final, you know, comments or notes for folks who might be listening, whether they're in the immigration tech space now or want to get into immigration tech, or, you know, I get a lot of lawyers who have business ideas and, you know, or just anybody who's not in the technology space and they say to themselves, I wish this existed. You know, do you have any advice for someone who's thinking of something but just isn't taking that step?
I would say if you're in immigration tech or you have an idea, join GMI, which is our community, our group, and share your idea, gather input, see if there's a good partner out there that would be interested in helping you with that. That's the one thing that it's always tough finding a business partner or somebody to help you with an idea, but there are people out there that, you know, are open to that sort of thing. So yeah, the best advice I can give you is join GMI, join our following. It's been tremendous for me, and I had mentioned this to you like when we had first met, but there's no good authoritative source for immigration and technology and sort of mesh it together. Right? There's no TechCrunch for immigration technology, and that's something that I desperately wanted like way before this, and even just like I remember some of your first Medium articles just talking about like AILA 2019 in Orlando, talking about the people that you had met, the demos you had. That was incredibly insightful for me, and that was what prompted me to actually reach out to you. And so there is an opportunity for people that sort of exist in this world to collaborate with others that are like-minded. I think that's how we are going to innovate in immigration technology. It's people that have crazy ideas from previous experiences and they want to get involved, right? Immigration is still very much dominated by various law firms, various mom and pop sort of boutique firms. So it's an opportunity for that experience that's siloed in those areas to get out into the wider market and provide a service for other people that need it. So
yeah, I love it. Collaboration. And I hope that I hope the, you know, current guests, future guests of the show, we all get to collaborate. Well, you know, Ian, thank you so much. This has been insightful and just really great to hear your story, and interesting and like really inspiring to know that you're a true problem solver. You're a true creator, and I hope that other folks follow along. So
yeah, and it's the other thing is that I really didn't answer any questions about immigration translations, which is unfortunate, because that's something that I'm 90% of my time on email is spent replying to similar inquiries about immigration translations. So my best advice for the lawyers that are listening out there is read up on it on our website, or just read up on it in general. There's a lot of misinformation that gets circulated about what's required for a translation for USCIS. It's not as complex as some attorneys make it out to be. So I highly recommend that they read up on what we've put out, as well as just go on USCIS website and see what they've put out as the sort of official word. I was hoping we get some more questions about that, but it doesn't look like anyone wants to grill me on the intricacies of that.
Yeah. So if they do want to grill you, where can they best reach you?
So I can be reached at Ian at ImmiTranslate.com. If you go onto our website, we have like a contact page, we have live chat. You're able to talk to one of our representatives, and they can give you some more information about our service. They can help answer questions about your needs. So whether you're not sure what type of translation you need, whether it's you're not sure if we do the language or do I need to notarize, that sort of thing. We deal with this every day. We know basically what we're doing. So I strongly encourage folks that are in the market, whether as an immigration attorney that wants to refer their client to a reputable service such as us, or a platform that wants to work on an integration with our translation platform. We're available, we're ready to go, and we're eager to go.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. So for all of you who need immigration translation documents, ImmiTranslate.com. Before we jump, I want to just say hi to a couple of folks who showed up. Stefan Campaign, he said, nice to be a part of the community as well. So it's nice to see you, and thank you for joining us. Tim Quirk, hi from beautiful West New York. How's it going, Tim? We also had hi Stefan Moritz, top-notch interview. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. So with that, Ian, again, thank you so much for sharing your time, for being here with us, for sharing your story and sort of where you're going next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. I think that I can't say that enough for those of us in the industry. It's an incredible tool. It's incredibly valuable. And I think that hopefully very soon we'll be announcing some exciting stuff that was facilitated by GMI. I look forward to posting that.
That's amazing. I look forward to it too. That's awesome. I'm so grateful. Yeah, thank you. So thank you everybody for joining. Episode number 2 in the books. More episodes coming at you every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern. That's 1 p.m. Pacific, and either earlier or later, wherever you are in the world. So thank you everyone for joining. Keep commenting. If you're watching this after the broadcast is done, leave your comments. I will go back and check them and leave replies. So thank you again for everyone for joining, and until next time, peace out.